Dr. Rachel Merson, and I'm a member of the SMA's board of directors and a clinical psychologist at the Center for Anxiety and Related Disorders at Boston University, where I work with kids with all kinds of anxiety presentations, including selective mutism, and I run our SM programming at BU. And I will let my co-presenter introduce herself.
Thank you. And I'm Dr. Becca Laptook. I'm a child psychologist at the Hasbro Partial Hospital Program in Providence, Rhode Island, and also work with kids with a range of anxiety disorders as well as other disorders, and work with little ones with SM. And I'm also a member of the board of Selective Mutism. And I we hope that some of the things that we talk about today can be helpful as we are in the midst of the holiday season here. And so we also just wanted to do a little housekeeping notes of reminding everyone that a lot of the information that we go over here and other helpful information you can find at on our website, including the recordings from the past annual conference. And so feel free, if you haven't already, to check out the selectivemutism.org website. Anything else, Dr. Merson?
I don't think so. Just so everyone knows, we will be sharing this recording as well. It'll get added to our video library and our YouTube channel. So if you need to hop out at some point tonight and miss some of it, you can access it later.
Okay, so we hope to go through the content here and leave ample time to answer questions. So as we mentioned before, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A, and even though I have yet to figure out how to access that, Dr. Merson knows how, and we'll get to them. All right, so okay. So this is just a thanks to who made the webinar possible through a generous grant from the Gordon and Marilyn Macklin Foundation. So what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about just, the topic of holiday stress in general, and then kind of our main focus is going to be what parents can do to prepare, and then what to do when you're there. So at the holidays. So that's how we're going to structure things. All right, so first talking about holiday stress. So, when you think about holidays, they're supposed to be fun. So it's fun to get together with family you haven't seen. You might do holidays with friends, see people that you don't usually get together with. Lots of different holiday activities. So fun things that only happen around this time of year. Fun things that you do with your kids, fun things they do at school. Coming up with school break as well. Lots of things that kids are usually excited about. Presents, presents, presents. If you ask my son, that's what he's most excited about, is presents. And then special gatherings. And then, of course, food, 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 and more food. So that all sounds great. And at the same time, we know that for kids with SM, but then also just kids in general, while that sounds great, it also means that there's going to be lots of unfamiliar people. They're not used to seeing people they've never met before, people they've only seen last year at the same time. It's also going to be a lot of people. So for some kids, they might eat that up, but for a lot of kids, that's overwhelming just to be around so many people at events or at someone's house. It also might mean going to new places, whether it's going over to a friend's house or a relative's house that they're not used to, or even like the fun activities might be new. Going to an event in your city. It seems exciting, but it's also a new place, which can be pretty daunting. Also, it's a time where we need to remind ourselves just how much we ask of kids. And so when there's lots of adults around, it's just natural that kids are going to get lots of questions, because that's just what people tend to do when you see kids. Oh, what did you get for this? What do you like this? What do you want to do now? It's just questions, questions, questions. There's also lots of things with food that seems exciting, but it's also unfamiliar. It's also foods that aren't your routine. It's things that it seems great for adults to maybe want to try, but kids see it as not such a great thing. And then just changes to routine. We know that changes to routine can be really stressful. Even as adults, even if it's something we're excited about, the reality is that when your routine changes up, it's hard. So even thinking about this past holiday of Thanksgiving, I had a couple days off, and while it was fun at first, I'm finding it hard to kind of get back into a schedule of things. And so for kids, it's the same thing. Any change of routine, even if it's for something fun, can be really stressful as well. And then just things that you're not used to, and it can lead to feelings of being overwhelmed. So while we think about holidays as this fun, exciting time, there's lots of stress that comes along with it. And so that's true for everybody, and it's especially true for kids with SM. So that moves us into, so what can you do? So what can you do to prepare for these times so that they don't have to feel as stressful and overwhelming? The first thing is to think about your expectations. So you want to really take some time to think about what are your own expectations for the holiday. And then you're going to ask yourself, how important is what that expectation is? So for example, um, if your child has been working in treatment on SM, and they've made a little progress, but they're still really struggling, and you really want them to go to the party and have a great time and talk to everybody, let's think about that expectation. Is that realistic? How important is that for that event? So you want to think, what's best for my child right now? Is this a time that it makes sense to practice and to push? Or is this a time where I want to really take down the stress level and just focus on my child having a good time, or my child just, participating and having fun with their relatives? So there's no real right or wrong answer. Whether, you think about at a holiday event, is this a time that I want to have an expectation of my child to make a step on their SM ladder? um it's, you really just have to think about where your child is and how important that is for that situation. So you want to set realistic goals. Is it realistic that your child's going to use their words in this place? So maybe if it was a different environment, that might be realistic, but realistically, if you're going to a place where there's going to be tons of people, there's going to be lots of unfamiliar things, lots of unstructured time, is that really the time where you think they can realistically practice and make that step? For some, the answer may be yes, and for others, it might be no. If it's yes, then you might want to plan a practice opportunity or two. Like, think about what are some things that you could do at that event, and then plan for it ahead of time. And then if not, you can always think about, well, what else can I do that maybe is kind of like a step down, right? So maybe thinking about some nonverbal opportunity that your child can do, which still might be a step in, the direction that they need to go, but maybe not as big a step for such an overwhelming time. So practicing and preparing. So you want to talk with your child beforehand about what to expect at whatever the holiday gathering or event is. And at home, you can practice. You can role play. You can play different roles, and have them kind of see how the scenario would play out. You can involve siblings in this. You can make it fun and see how it will go. And then whatever reward system that you're using with your child, you would want to use that during the holidays too. So thinking what the expectation is, and then linking it back to whatever system you're using to reward progress. And then you want to just also think about not only what you're expecting and what your concerns are, but also just kind of put a feeler out there to see what your child's concerns or what ifs are. So you might also be placing your own what ifs and concerns in your child's, for your child, when really they may not be thinking about that at all. On the contrary, they may not be saying what they're thinking. So you really want to just kind of like put a feeler out there, see what they come up with, and then use your best judgment on what you want to do for that. Okay. And then you want to remember that the holidays, it's not all about speaking. So we want to think about what are all the ways that you want your child to be able to participate and have a good time and enjoy themselves during the holidays. So thinking about other things that they can, take a role in. So things like involving them in cooking or baking for whatever it is that's coming up. having a role in wrapping the presents and taking the lead in that. Thought I had another one up there. Sorry. And then preparing relatives. So you want to talk with others who are going to be at the gathering about selective mutism, and you want to let them know what to expect from both you and your child. Okay, it's real, most people just want to know how they can be helpful. So most people are appreciative if you let them know what they should and shouldn't do. Obviously, there could be that one relative that doesn't want to be told what to do, and then you just know we're going to kind of steer clear of this one. But in general, people really just want to know how they can be helpful. So the more information you give them and the more guidance you can give them, the more comfortable they're going to be in interacting, with you and your child. And there is on our website, and we'll give this information during this talk. There is on our website in the online library, there is an example of a letter that you can give relatives that explains SM and can go into detail if you don't already have something like that. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Merson.
All right. So, with those kind of preliminary thoughts in mind, I get to talk next about so when you're actually in the moment and you're at this party or holiday event, what are some things that you can do to help set your child up for success and to kind of optimize how the situation may go? And in addition to talking about expectations beforehand, I think that it often is really helpful to give your child a little bit of extra warm up time, especially if it's a new situation and especially if you anticipate it being a crowded situation. It's often much harder to walk into a room that is already full of like 20 kids running around than it is to get there when there are only 2 or 3 kids there, or maybe even be the first kid and have a chance to sort of get settled in and warmed up. In addition, you want to just sort of orient your child to the space if it's not an environment in which they've already spent a lot of time. And again, often you're going to a family friend's house, you're going to a an event at a church or religious institution, you're going to your relatives, your great aunt Millie's house who you just see once a year. So your child may not really know their way around the environment. So getting up there early gives them a chance to kind of take a little bit of a tour, learn where everything is, figure out where is the bathroom, where is the playroom, where is a quiet spot that I can go to if I need a little bit of a break and need to step away. You might also think about how are you going to communicate with your child in this environment. And you may have some kids, especially kids who are younger, that are going to stick pretty close to you, but other kids may be more able to kind of go off on their own. So, what is the plan for checking in and seeing how they're going and if they need any kind of support? And you can have a sort of secret code with your kiddo. Sometimes this is actually especially nice for kids who are a little bit older, our teens and tweens who may need your help, but have a harder time asking for it because it feels a little bit less developmentally appropriate. It may feel more embarrassing. So just having kind of a signal that your child can give you if they need to take a break, want you to go for a walk outside with them, etc. And as you're getting into a new situation, it can often be helpful when there is something specific that your child can do. Very frequently, we bring kids to a party, and especially at the beginning, as everyone is sort of filling in. It's kind of a bit of a free for all. And for some kids, that can be helpful to not have any expectations and to just let them warm up slowly. For other kids, not having a set activity planned for them makes it much harder to kind of join in the free play. And so I think, think about what might work best for your child. And for some kids who are anxious, it can be really helpful for them to know, okay, we're going to get here. To this event, and the first thing we're going to do is decorate ornaments, and that is something that is structured and planned for them, so they don't need to kind of figure out what am I going to do, what am I going to choose, and how do I get involved in this unfamiliar place. So as you are thinking about kind of introducing your kiddo to this environment, you want to have that warm up time to not just get used to the place, but also to have them have an opportunity to establish using their voice in that environment. And so that might be having some one-on-one time with you and using some skills that you may have learned in therapy, like child-directed interaction and verbal directed interaction, um, to get your kiddo comfortable and get them just consistently answering questions from you or from someone else in the family with whom they already speak. If those terms aren't familiar to you, don't worry. Number one, there are lots of resources on our website, and we can direct you to some to kind of give you a brief overview of those skills for warming kids up. I think we're, sort of beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about today to go into the details of a warm up and a fade in, but there's lots of that there. However, the gist of it is that if you want to find practice opportunities for a kiddo to use their voice in a new situation, the first step is generally having them speak to someone that they can already speak to and make sure that they're able to do that. And then we'll slowly bring in a new person. And so we might identify a particular family friend, a particular relative, a particular neighbor or coach who at this event we want to kind of fade in. So not just as your child having some one-on-one time speaking with you, we're slowly bringing in a new person. And that person first may hang out kind of on the side of the room. They may come a little bit closer and observe you decorating the ornaments, and then may sit down and decorate the ornament with you. And during this time, you may be asking your child questions. They may be responding to you, and then you can slowly guide them in responding to questions from the other person or speaking directly to the other person. And those are, again, helpful things to do before everything gets really chaotic. So you want to build in that warm up time. Because there often is a lot going on at holiday gatherings, it can be, as I just said, hard for your kiddo to know where to start. So, one option is to have something really structured for them to do. It also always is a good idea. And this, I think, holds true for many kids. Not just kids with selective mutism, to give some choices. So it might be, do you want to go play upstairs? Come sit with me to see the people in the living room, or do something else. And then you are guiding them, but giving them a little bit of control. So you can give choices about activities. You can also give choices about kind of how long they're going to do something. So, if they want to play with their cousins, but they're feeling kind of nervous about it, you might say, do you want to play with your cousins until it's time to eat? Or should I come get you in 10 minutes? And then you may, help your child work up to spending some more time separate from you at the event, doing some things independently, but in kind of bite-sized chunks that might feel more manageable. And then if they say they want you to come in 10 minutes and you come in 10 minutes, they clearly may be ready to come have a break with you, but you also may be able to give them another choice and say, oh, it looks like you and your cousins are having such a great time playing Barbies or playing Xbox. Do you want to keep playing, or do you want to come back downstairs with me? And again, you're letting them take some control, but within parameters that you're setting. Um, so, as Becca talked about, there are going to be some kids who are not quite ready to practice brave talking yet. And that's okay. We can sometimes, I think, as parents, like sort of beat ourselves up for not taking advantage of what seems like a great opportunity with all these people around and these activities that lend themselves to brave talking. But sometimes it's not the right time, and that's fine. However, when it is the right time, we can be fun and creative about it. And, it's, I think, always nice to put a creative twist on our bravery practices. But especially at the holidays, if we can make some of what we're doing into a game or like a themed activity, you might get a little bit more buy-in from your child. It might feel less like work and a little bit more fun. And we will talk a bit about some of the things that you can do. And I see that there is a really great question that came through the question and answer. I think that we'll save that one and talk a bit more about it in our Q&A period at the end. And we're going to save a good chunk of time for questions. So and I'll have slides that sort of give some examples of all of these things. So do a holiday bingo game, a trivia game, a candy hunt, a favorite survey. You can have your child take orders from people from other guests at a party. You can have your child do a reading at some point during kind of the meal or during the event. And I think that again, I kind of have a slide that goes along with each of these, so I'll talk about them with those examples. If Becca, you want to
Mhm.
move us along. So with a game like Holiday Bingo, you can print something like this online. You can be like super crafty and make your own. You can think about how many squares do you really need. But in this game, what you can do is give your child a bingo board and then print out a board and cut the pictures into squares and give all of the attendees at the party a square and then kind of send your child off. This is sort of at a higher level goal if they're ready for some more independence, kind of send them off to ask relatives like, what picture do you have, and see if they can get a whole line or fill in the board to get bingo. With all of these things that I'll talk about, you can kind of scaffold up, meaning making it more challenging for your child, or scaffold down, meaning providing more support. So this is also something that you can do with your child and help them approach the guests at the party. And you may prompt them and just say, oh, Aunt Sally, we have a question for you. Then you may turn to your child and say, okay, Jasmine, do you want to know if Aunt Sally has a penguin or if she has a candy cane? And then Jasmine can say penguin or candy cane, and you can help your child ask the question. So that's a way to make it a little bit easier, but you can have something that is more fun. This is a holiday trivia game that you can help your child play. You can come up with a couple questions. Google is your friend here. And you may have your child go ask different guests at the party these questions, and see how many people were able to get the right answer, and then have your child tell them the correct answers. And same thing for kids who are sort of farther along in their SM journey, who still benefit from having some structure and specific brave talking practices. You may kind of sit in the room with them and kind of watch them and say, okay, I want you to go ask like Uncle Jack, Aunt Linda, and Grandma these questions, and they may be able to go do it. For other kids, you may kind of walk along with them and help them ask more directly. But again, this is something you can kind of personalize. It can be about anything. You can have your child help you find the questions and involve them in creating this. And if anyone is wondering, there, according again to Google, there are 16 different ways you can spell Hanukkah. And it is true that Hanukkah has been celebrated in outer space. So, um, for a candy hunt, you can get some candy canes or some Hanukkah gelt or any other type of treat that might be exciting for your child. And you can pass them out to several guests at the party. And then your child's goal is to approach the guests and ask, do you have a candy cane? Do you have a gold coin? Do you have a Hershey Kiss? And the more people they ask, the more candy they get to collect. So there's something kind of inherently rewarding about this activity. But with all of these, again, as Dr. Laptook said, you can and should think about folding them into any type of existing reward system that you have. So if your child's earning points for talking to new people, and those points get to be traded in for screen time or stored up for some type of prize or privilege, certainly you kind of think about applying that in these holiday contexts. And again, if you are feeling like I don't really know what to do with a reward system, there are lots of website resources for that. This is an example of a survey that your child may give. And, I picked three of my family's favorite holiday movies. You may choose others, or it doesn't have to be anything related to the holiday. Again, it could be anything that your child is motivated to ask about. Maybe it's your favorite sport, soccer, baseball, or basketball, or maybe it's your favorite Taylor Swift song, or your favorite Mario Kart character. Um, but you can have your child come up with a question and a few answer options. And then kind of as we talked about with some of the other activities, you can sort of support them in going around to guests and asking the question. You can also help them come up with their answer to the question and have people ask them the question back. And every time they ask the question, you might say, okay, now, like, Uncle Joe, please find out what Susie's favorite movie is. And have your child practice answering as well. And then at the end of the night, this could be something that your child shares with everyone there, which was the favorite movie, which is the winner. If you want to, stick with the drink orders, you can have your child play waiter. And this doesn't have to be drink orders. It could be anything related to what you're serving or what food's available. But you may even give them like a little notepad where they can go, write down if they're old enough, everyone's orders and bring it back to the kitchen and then help deliver, the apple cider and the water and the lemonade to the people that ordered it. And the kind of last creative idea for some holiday themed brave talking practices is having your child say a blessing or a prayer, if this is something that your family does. And for some kids, this is a really high level speaking goal, because it's not just talking, it's also kind of like public speaking where they may have an audience. And that may be something that they're not quite ready for yet. For other kids that I've worked with, it actually is easier to read something, especially if it's something they've had an opportunity to practice, than it is to kind of generate more kind of natural speech in the moment. And so again, you kind of want to think about how far your child is in their journey. What are the goals that they're working on? Like if they're working on public speaking in school, then this may be a great thing to do over the holidays. But if they're just working on like answering a simple question, then this may be too much. But again, it's something that you can practice at home, maybe just with you as a caregiver, and then you can make the group a little bit longer and maybe they can practice with you and their siblings. And then you can even do this a few times at a holiday event, and invite like the two grandparents who are there to come listen to the prayer, and then invite three cousins to come listen to it. And so it could be something that a kiddo is doing like at a dinner table in front of everyone, or it could be something that they're actually doing several times with small groups of people. And there are lots of ways to think about challenging your child non-verbally. We know that for some kids with selective mutism, they can just be really behaviorally inhibited, and it can be hard for them even to kind of like participate in things in a nonverbal way. So we can find tasks for them to do where they can be a helper, which often feels good, and can often be a really important step in their process of just kind of like being involved in a group activity. So, maybe things like setting the table, helping to prepare food, organizing gifts, passing out gifts can actually be a challenging thing and a good thing for kids to practice, because they're having to like figure out who the gift goes to and handing it to that person, which can be a bit anxiety provoking in a way of helping them face their fears. In terms of putting up decorations, for some kids with SM and anxiety, sharing their own art or things that they've created can be anxiety provoking. And so a good challenge may be for them to hang up some decorations that they've made for other people to admire, and they're kind of pushing themselves out of their comfort zone in that way. So there are lots of ways to think about bravery in terms of talking, but also nonverbal bravery that just is giving kids the opportunity to really kind of be involved and have an active role, whereas otherwise they may be kind of standing on the side. And the most important thing that we want to emphasize is that as much as the holidays can be stressful for all of us, we want you to have fun. We want your child to have fun. And because of that, it is okay to say, you know what, we're going to um, this event, Snacks with Santa, and we're not actually going to practice brave talking at all. We're just going to go and be there, and we're going to do our thing as like the four of us. And we're going to wave to Santa from across the room, but we don't even need to worry about going to sit on his lap. And we're just going to have fun being there. Or, we know that our kid was really comfortable with their cousins, and can speak really easily to their cousins. And we just want them having fun playing with their cousins, without having to worry about brave talking, because they do that all day, every day. So it's okay to have a break for your child and for you as well, because as a parent of a kid with selective mutism, it can be a lot of pressure to manage these situations and to feel like, oh, I need to explain to everyone how they should ask my child questions and how to interact with them. And I'm going to need to manage the meltdown when it inevitably happens. And like, it's your holiday too. And you may just want to have fun connecting with like your siblings that you haven't seen in a while, or your neighbors that you haven't had a chance to talk to. So I think that it's okay to like kind of give yourself that grace and to know when it's important, or not even important, but when is it worthwhile to really say we're going to do some bravery practice and go into a situation with that plan, and when we're going to say like, hey, we're just going to kind of have a good time and enjoy this holiday activity without working so hard. So we're doing pretty well on timing. We were hoping to open things up for questions at 8:40, and it is 8:38. Um, so there was one question that kind of came through earlier on in the presentation. I'm not sure if you can see it in the chat, or in the question and answer, but I can share. And then, we know that there's I'm sure a lot of things related to the holidays that we didn't cover. So if there are things that you're wondering about, either generally or for your specific family, please, let us know and we have a little bit of time to chat about these things. So somebody asked, is the family being punished or did they do something wrong to cause this in their child? I have lots of guilty feelings, especially my husband and I. And Becca, do you want to jump in and then
Yeah, I'll
add to?
start with, so no, we know that selective mutism is an anxiety disorder, just like all different kinds of anxiety disorders that kids can have social anxiety, they separation anxiety. Um, a lot of times what happens is that kids have a predisposition towards anxiety, and then there are things that they kind of that they um, learn and get kind of set a pattern. Their behavior gets set in a pattern, but it's not because of anything that one person did. It's like all those factors kind of combine in a perfect storm to influence what they are just naturally struggling with. So it's an anxiety disorder that no one causes, just like any other disorder that a child may have. But it does mean that there are things that you can learn to help your child with it and to help them break that pattern and to help them kind of learn a more adaptive way of responding and managing their anxiety. Because right now it's more like they are just kind of frozen when they're expected to respond, but it's not because of anything that one person did. And in the past, there were thoughts that SM is caused by trauma, and that's not what the thinking is in the research, and that's not what the evidence shows. So it is not something that one person did that caused selective mutism. What would you add, Rachel?
Yeah, and I think that amongst parents of kids with SM, feeling guilty is a common experience. It's really understandable and is a sign, honestly, of how much you care as parents. And um I really would echo a lot of what Becca said and strongly say that it is not anyone's fault, especially not yours. I am putting a link in the chat to the SMA's handbook for caregivers, which is a great resource. It's pretty there's a ton of information in it. It's pretty accessible, but also meaty. It's about 50 pages, but there's actually a section about self care for caregivers in there that I think is good for everyone to read, but especially for the folks who asked that question. I think maybe kind of really helpful to take a look at that. And someone said, thank you for the brave talking practice ideas. 4 of the 5 were new for me. So you are very welcome. Glad to be able to be putting some new ideas out there. And we also got a question in the chat, which I think is a great one. So for kids who have no daycare for 2 weeks, when they're usually there every day, so talk about changes in routine. That's a big one. What are your thoughts on kind of how often you would try to get them out of the house, interacting with others? And this is for someone who doesn't have a lot of family nearby. Um, so I would say that kind of like everything else in life is kind of a balance. I don't think that you need to be pushing yourself to go do something every day if that's not what you would typically be doing as a family. And 2 weeks is probably a long time for your child who is working on brave talking to kind of not have any interactions with people other than you, or very limited interactions with people, you kind of other than you and immediate family. So, I might say like every other day, every 2 days, trying to kind of get out and doing something. And it is great, of course, when there are other people that you have connections with that you can interact with. But even if you're kind of going out into the community and you're doing brave talking practices at the library or at Target, or if you're in a place where it's not cold and snowy, like a playground or a park, those are good opportunities too. So don't fret if you feel like, oh, my social calendar is kind of thin, because you can still find kind of community-based things to do. And some of the activities we talked about, like a survey you could have your child do at a park, or there again are lots of resources on our website. I'm going to find our bravery bingo board, which has a lot of ideas for brave talking practice in the community, and I'll put that link in the chat too.
I finally can see all the questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I see another question. How do I respond when someone labels my child as shy in front of my child? That's a good question. So I guess I would want to think about what you typically say, assuming that that's probably come up in other scenarios. So I would think about like what you would typically say. I always want to think about what message I want my child to hear, right? And then use that to guide what you would say in front of your child. So if you know that your child is very aware that they have anxiety when it comes to speaking and they're practicing brave talking and that that's what they are doing in therapy, then I would just kind of reframe it like that. So if someone says, oh, your child's shy, it's like, oh, they're working on being brave, and you would just kind of like reframe it in the language that you want your child to hear. And that could be different for everybody, kind of how you want to say that.
Hey, we have a couple more questions in the chat. Um, this is a great and complicated question. So I have a friend who's transgender and who has SM and doesn't talk outside of his friend group due to trauma with his family. Is there a way I can support him when he doesn't interact with people outside of this very small group of three? He wants to participate in activities and is really good at interacting with a speech assistant app, but has told me he hesitates to use it with new people around. Um, First of all, kind of kudos to you for being such a caring and thoughtful friend and really trying to think about how you can support someone who you care about, who it sounds like is in a really tricky situation. Um, a couple thoughts that kind of come to mind for me, and I'm going to sort of take this in two different ways, and would kind of love to hear what Becca has to say as well. And I say this not knowing the ages of everyone in this situation, which sometimes can make a difference. Um, so um, if there are activities that he wants to participate in, perhaps those are things that you can attend with him, and maybe just have him, or encourage him to speak to you or use his app just with you. And sometimes, if you're in a crowded place and you're using something like that, you actually kind of blend into the crowd and people don't notice quite as much. And that can be a good way to kind of slowly get used to you kind of either using an app or even using your voice with more people around. You're kind of in the corner of a public space, and people are sort of doing their own thing, but you're giving your friend practice, kind of communicating in that setting. You also even might want to think about activities that you'd enjoy doing together that you can go out and do where the communication demands are kind of limited and he doesn't necessarily need to do a lot of speaking, but can still be involved in participating in whatever the fun activity is and being a part of the group and feeling kind of socially connected that way. Um, if this is someone who is, I'm assuming, a little bit older. If it's someone who's over 18, something that actually can be really helpful is to talk with him about connecting with like professional support and helping find resources for therapy in your area. If this is someone who is still in a school setting, like a school counselor, school psychologist might be a really great first step for that, though then sometimes there does have to be some family involvement. Um, Also on SMA's website is a list of treating providers. So these are people kind of in our SM community who we know have experience working with individuals with these challenges. And so letting him know about that or helping him go to the website and see who might be available in your area could be helpful as well.
Another question: over Thanksgiving break, my child had so many more meltdowns than usual. Any more tips for helping her over Christmas break? So I think that this question kind of gets at what we talked about in the beginning, just the idea that remembering that the holidays, even though they seem exciting and fun, can really be very stressful for everyone, even if you don't think that they're stressful or it doesn't seem like they would be. So, this I think really shows that your child is picking up on that stress. So whether it's that it's, different routines or things that your child might be just feeling more expectation than you realize, and just being really aware of that and trying to make sure that you're planning downtime and that it's not just go go go, or even if it seems like it's fun fun fun, just remember that your child, while they may seem like they want to do it, may not be perceiving it all as happy and fun, that at some level it's stressful for them. So I think not overscheduling, taking breaks, checking in with them more, making sure that there's some kind of familiar routines as much as possible, even if there are fun and new things. Not having everything be fun and new can probably be helpful, and just trying to keep a lot of the familiarity that they're used to during that holiday time, so that it's not as overwhelming.
The one other thing that I would add to that is making sure you're attending to like just kind of the basics of sleep, healthy eating, hydration, physical activity. Because lots of times around the holidays, all those things go to the wayside. You're staying up later than usual. Your kid is staying up later than usual. Instead of eating like an actual dinner, they're eating a few bites of mac and cheese and a few chicken nuggets and then 4 cookies while they're running around. And all of that can really make it more difficult to regulate emotions and make your kiddo much more vulnerable to melting down, especially if they're in situations that otherwise might be overwhelming and um, be anxiety provoking for them.
I see. How can I help support my child when it comes to opening gifts in front of others? This causes shutdowns in my daughter. We have her birthday coming up in Christmas. Um, so one thing I would think about also is just going back to when we talked about expectations. So does she have to open all her gifts in front of everybody? Can she open one, but then like the rest you guys do at home? So I think trying to think about that, like, is there a way that it's not, if it's stressful for her, is there a way that it can be compromised where there's a little bit that's part of whatever the gathering is, but then like the bulk of it is something that she does where she's more comfortable? And then I guess also just thinking about what I'd be curious to think of what you feel like is most stressful for her about that. Is it an expectation to say thank you afterwards? Is it a lot of like noise and like big, like, oh, look what you got, and just like a lot of to do around the opening of presents, which might feel overwhelming and stressful. In which case, maybe talking to relatives or whoever's there about kind of like dialing it down and keeping it calm. So I guess it depends on what part of that you feel like leads to the shutdowns, and then seeing if there's anything that you can manipulate around that.
And if thinking about those expectations in your family, it is really important to open gifts in front of an audience. Number one, it may be helpful to also talk with like relatives about shifting the expectations. Another thing that can sometimes be helpful is to help your child practice that so they're sort of more prepared for that situation. So maybe you do a practice round of opening presents. You wrap up some like things that are really silly, like a banana and a, I don't know, bottle of shampoo. You can be kind of fun about it. And then have your daughter open them in front of like a smaller audience at home, you and any siblings or, one or two other people, and have everyone actually practice making a big deal or go out of your way to make a big deal of it. So she kind of gets used to being the center of attention and having that audience. And that can help prepare her for kind of the real thing. One of the things that Becca just mentioned that I think is worth talking about a little bit more is the pressure around the holidays to say thank you. Of course, we all want our kids to be polite, and it's probably important for everyone on this call. And for many kids with SM, those social niceties, saying please, saying thank you, even saying hello and goodbye can be some of the hardest things to say, even though they seem super straightforward. And, I think in part it's because there's a lot of pressure around those things and we're constantly nagging kids like, what do you say? Tell grandma thank you. And you can sometimes have relatives who get like a little bit bent out of shape when they don't get the thank you and may shame your child for not saying it. So if that is an issue in your family, I think that it's worthwhile going into any holiday events sort of planning for that. And this again may involve working with your child beforehand to practice saying thank you in different contexts to sort of get them ready for it. Or it may involve talking to relatives about like, hey, that we're really working hard on brave talking. We know it's really important to you that Rory says thank you, and that's not something that we're ready for. So instead, he's going to like give you a thumbs up, and that's going to be his way of saying thank you. And then maybe you have your child like write a little thank you note after to express their appreciation. So there can be different ways of like, circumventing that and levels of showing that appreciation without the like, grandma's waiting. What are you going to say? Don't you like the present? And then everyone just feels badly.
A question here. I'm dealing with a 13-year-old daughter who is struggling with many issues, anxiety being one. What's the most important thing I could do to help her talk more and be more social because she always wants to be isolated and not be with her immediate family? That's an extra hard question because on top of the anxiety, you're also getting into the teen years where you just kind of take all of those issues and make it even blow it up even more. um, so I think you want to again like think about expectations, right? So is she going to be the life of the party and down with the relatives talking the whole time? Probably not. And so maybe thinking about what's like one step forward that she can take at whatever the next activity is and talk about that with her beforehand. So thinking about, we want to balance you having your own space and also being involved with the family. So how do you want to do that, and then giving her some choices, and that way she doesn't feel like you're just telling her what to do or telling her she can't be by herself, but rather saying these are both important. You have your space and it's important to be with the family. How do you want to do that, and helping her feel a little bit empowered that she has some choice in it? Rachel, what would you add?
Yeah, I've had a couple adolescents that I've worked with where we've actually used that like time to go off on their own on their phone as a reward for the social engagement or the bravery practice. So, kind of like Becca said, I definitely would say giving her some choices around what to do. But one way of thinking about it could be okay, so I know that it's not so fun to have to play with your 8-year-old cousin, but and she really looks up to you and really loves spending time with you. You know that she really loves decorating cookies and building with Legos and whatever else. So you have a choice of doing one of those things with her, and guess what, we know that that's a lot, and we want to give you some of your own time after that. So after 30 minutes of cookie decorating with like Molly, then I'm actually going to let you go off on your phone and not bother you for 30 minutes, and so you can kind of balance that way. So I think we just have a minute or two left. We have one last question about using a speech assistant app as a step in the process, and is if that's something we recommend. Um, and for me, I'm gonna say like 9 times out of 10, no. There are like a handful of situations where I think that it can be really helpful in getting kids to the next step, especially if it's some type of app that uses a recording of their own voice and they're playing their voice and then their voice is being heard in the sort of community and by other people. But I think that unless you have a kiddo who is like really completely shut down and not able to communicate in any other ways, I probably would actually try to stay away from the apps. But that's just my opinion.
I'd agree. I think you know, for some kids, they can get stuck in using another crutch when really what we want to do is with any anxiety disorder is face the anxiety and make step towards decreasing avoidance of it. So in some ways, using an alternative to speaking is just avoiding the speaking. But like Rachel said, there's some creative ways to use technology and assistant when you're recording your own voice and then playing the recording, so you're not speaking live but it's still your voice that's being heard, so you are making that step towards um, being able to speak in the moment.
So I think that brings us to 9 o'clock, at least here on the East Coast. So we'll wrap things up for tonight. Thank you all for being here and for your thoughtful questions. We know that logging on to a webinar after a day of work is, as the holiday season is like rapidly underway, can be a big effort in and of itself. So we appreciate you being here, and also like give yourselves a pat on the back for taking the time to prioritize this and help your child in this way.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate you attending.